Hello and welcome to Film 2251, The Art of Adaptation. My name is Mohsen Nasrin. So far in this course, we discussed different theories of adaptation, specifically with regards to the notion of fidelity in adaptation. However, in contemporary cinema after the 90s, adaptations became a form of communication with the text. And often we can see certain intertextual relationship between the movie and other texts, more than one text. Happened again in the 90s and early 2000s was the rise of what I would call intermediacy in film adaptation. What it means is that sometimes there is a text that is referring to previous text, and the adaptation is technically adaptations of the second text that is based on a famous novel. So the purpose of the second text that stands in the middle is to make the movie more relevant for the contemporary audiences. Sometimes Americanize it, but most of the time making certain ideas from the original text that are for that time couldn't be expressed freely or for some reason suppressed, make them bolder for the contemporary audiences. So when you watch a movie like The Human Stain, the structure of the movie reminds you of a novel by Scott Fitzgerald. However, The Human Stain is adaptation of another novel. It's that novel, the secondary novel, that is very similar in the structure to that of Fitzgerald's. Similarly, people are reminded of the novel Death in Venice by Thomas Mann when they watched A Single Man. So A Single Man is again is based on a contemporary novel, but definitely the novel was looking at the work of Thomas Mann. And the more obvious one, The Hours, that is going to be the topic of this week's class, is based on the book The Hours, but that book, The Hours, is an adaptation of Mrs. Dalloway. So, as a postmodern adaptation, you can see three storylines in different times that they are related to each other, but the comparison between all of them is interesting because it would heighten certain ideas in Mrs. Dalloway, important themes in Mrs. Dalloway that for the time that it was written was not played out in an active way. So it's just like queer theory, for example, specifically for the hours, the idea of lesbianism, and in a single man, there's a queer relationship too. So make that more relevant to a contemporary character and a contemporary audience. Similarly, the humanist thing adds the idea of race.
Stina Paulson, that's, what is that, Swedish?
Close. It's a Danish and Icelandic.
So you're not from New York?
How could you tell? Fergus Falls, Minnesota.
Well, Miss Stina Paulson from Fergus Falls, Minnesota. This is my gift for you. Tender as the Night, F. Scott Fitzgerald. He's from the Midwest, too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coffee?
Coffee.
What happened?
To what?
The cut over your eye.
Oh,
By placing such scenes, the director is admitting that it's a text based on another famous text by Fitzgerald. It's not just a plagiarism. It's a postmodern communication that the movie is doing between these two texts. So in a way, the movie Human Instincts is looking at two texts, not just the second text, the novel that is based on. So the reading assigned for this week discusses that how these presents challenges in the adaptation process then, especially in something like the hours, for example, is an important step in the move from text to screen. So there are certain important themes in Mrs. Dalloway, and we're going to see their progression into the next novel, The Hours. For example, the theme of identity is very important. Sexuality is very important, and specifically the suppressed sexuality, such as women's sexuality or homosexuality. The idea of failure is important, or what in the hour discuss as the idea of triviality.
Um, Originally, the book was just going to be a contemporary retelling of Mrs. Dalloway. What if that character in the Wolf novel were alive today, if she had the kind of choices that women have now, because when Mrs. Dalloway lived in the 20s, there really wasn't, you could be a teacher, a nurse, or a wife. Not that it's not that we're done with women's rights, but it's anyway. Blah blah blah. I told you, I asked you not to let me blab on, and I'm going to hold you to that. I came to realize that we don't need another version of Mrs. Dalloway. We've already got Mrs. Dalloway. We've already got a great novel. We don't need me to do a modern version of it. And I thought, oh, well, that one didn't work out. But then I thought, oh. And I added the character of Virginia Woolf, thinking, what if this was about the character she created and the author herself when she first began to create the character? And it still wasn't working. It still felt sort of academic and like a conceit. And again, I was going to give it up. I thought, oh, this is just not working. This is an idea for a book and not a real book. And I was sitting at my desk about to throw this one out and start another novel. And I had this image of Clarissa Dalloway and Virginia Woolf and my mother. And Mom, what are you doing in my hallucination? And I thought about it, and I realized that my mother, who is very much the character played by Julianne Moore in the movie we're about to see, I think like a lot of women at the time, some women still today, she was too big for her job, wife and mother. She should have done something more in the world, and it wasn't enough for her. But rather than get a job, she became obsessed with perfection.
So one thing, if you compare the hours with Mrs. Dalloway, you can see the contrast between the suppressed sexuality presented in Mrs. Dalloway and something like queer theory that was becoming popular academically in the 90s. The idea of the possibility of having fluid sexual identity. Moreover, because we have three stories, three timelines, and three characters. So we have one female character that is the modern embodiment of the previous characters in Mrs. Dalloway. What if that view of sexuality would exist today when women have more chances? So all these things create different relationship between these texts, communication between the movie, the hours, and the original novel, Mrs. Dalloway. So this awareness of textuality um, gives opportunity for reappropriations of ideas important in the original text into the other text. that which try to appeal to more modern audiences. Another idea in this film is the idea of sentimentality. Performances that are not realistic and they look like women films of the 50s and 60s. A kind of performance that would be considered as cheesy, not intellectually valuable. And now, in that this film, sentimentality has become an important tool for passing on political messages.
Yes, I'm Richard's mother.
Of course. I'm Clarissa Vaughn. Please come in. My friend Sally is in the kitchen, and my daughter. We were having a party. We were going to have a party.
I was lucky I got the last plane from Toronto.
So that's the monster.
It hurt, of course. I can't pretend it didn't hurt, but I know why he did it.
You left Richard when he was a child.
I left both my children. I abandoned them. They say it's the worst thing a mother can do. You have a daughter.
Yes. But I never met Julia's father.
You so wanted a child. There are times when you don't belong, and you think you're going to kill yourself. Once I went to a hotel. Later that night, I made a plan. The plan was I would leave my family when my second child was born. And that's what I did. I got up one morning, made breakfast, went to the bus stop, got on a bus. I'd left a note. I got a job in a library in Canada. It would be wonderful to say you regretted it. It would be easy. But what does it mean? What does it mean to regret when you have no choice? It's what you can bear. There it is. No one's going to forgive me. It was death. I chose life.
We know that an important theme about Mrs. Dalloway is certain confusion about sexuality. The Hours adds to that confusion by, for example, putting a character that Mrs. Dalloway has some sort of flirtation with as gay in the movie, the relationship between Meryl Streep characters and Peter Walsh, for example. Or, for example, there was a character by the name of Sally in the original text who was Mrs. Dalloway's partner. However, at that time, such queer relationship between them couldn't be expressed blatantly. But in the movie, again, Meryl Streep characters has a partner, a lesbian partner whose name is Sally. So after watching the hours for this class on Wednesday, we're going to talk about how such issues, the meanings or specific themes in the book is redeveloped through the hours and the movie adaptations of the hours.